One of my earliest and most treasured rugby memories is the day the Springboks won the Rugby World Cup in 2007. I was a wild-eyed rugby-mad 7-year-old who wanted nothing more than for my team to be the best in the world. When John Smith lifted the Webb Ellis Trophy, I fell in love, and it marked the beginning of what I consider the greatest South African rugby era of all time. This is the story of the Springboks of 2007 to 2009. One would think that winning a World Cup would be the highlight of any team's legacy, but in this case, it was only the beginning. Jake White, Springbok coach at the time, did a phenomenal job in building a world-class team, which was initially struggling when he took over in 2004. This team was packed with absolute legends of the game, like John Smith, Percy Montgomery, Brian Habana, Victor Matfield, Jacques Fourie, Fourie du Preez, the list goes on. So, going into 2008, the Springbok team barely had to change. Only a handful of players were no longer available, such as Oosturant, and, well, yeah, he's the only one from the starting lineup who actually retired. This made team selection much easier for new Bok coach Peter de Villiers when he took over in 2008. 2008 was a decent year for Bok rugby. They ended third in the Tri-Nations, which was disappointing, but they performed well in the end-of-year tour by beating Wales, Scotland and England. Probably the highlight of this year was beating New Zealand in New Zealand, which is always an incredible achievement. Scrum half Ricky January scored a try in this game, which is easily one of the greatest Springbok tries of all time. It was scored in the dying minutes and won the game for South Africa. I remember watching this try live and being filled with absolute crazy excitement. This just showed the quality of that side. Winning in the last minute against New Zealand in New Zealand requires absolute class. 2009, however, was a great year and just kept getting better. In fact, I'll go as far as to say this was the greatest year in South African rugby history. Here's why. South Africa beat New Zealand 3 times in a row and won the Tri-Nations. They won the British and Irish Lions to a 2-1 and were the #1 ranked team in the world. Not only that, but the Bulls were Super Rugby champions that year, and the Blitzboks, the South African Sevens team, were reigning champions. South African rugby won virtually every single trophy they could possibly win during this period. The World Cup, Super Rugby, the British and Irish Lions Tour, and the World Sevens. They were dominating in every aspect of the game. By this time, the Springboks looked a bit different to the World Cup winning team of 2007, but the main group of players was still there. Coach Peter de Villiers did well to bring in some new names at the right moment, such as Morné Steyn, who ended up winning the British and Irish Lions Tour with a 50-meter penalty kick in only his second Springbok game ever. This was one of the greatest rugby teams to ever play. They were beating everybody, and even players today are still talking about the Springboks of 2009. Here's what Dan Carter recently said about the Springbok team. The Springboks were quite dominant. They were dominating at Super Rugby back then as well, the Bulls back then, and South African rugby was such a force. It was brutal. Every time you played against the Boks, you knew that you were going to be sore until Wednesday or Thursday. The Springboks were physical, sharp, and simply terrifying. Unfortunately, some cracks started to show towards the end of 2009. South Africa lost to both France and Ireland during the end-of-year tour. In 2010, they finished third in the Tri-Nations, winning only 1 game, which was against Australia. During the end-of-year tour, yeah, they beat Ireland, Wales and England, but they lost to Scotland. Then in 2011, they finished third in the Tri-Nations yet again. They lost to New Zealand 47, which is a big loss. Yes, they did beat New Zealand later in the competition in Port Elizabeth, but it was the only win after 3 straight losses. Then the 2011 World Cup. What a nightmare that was. We barely scraped past Wales in the group stage, winning only by 1 point. Then we had to suffer with Bryce Lawrence in our quarterfinal match against Australia. In that game, Bryce Lawrence allowed David Pocock to make more illegal steals than Jacob Zuma at SARS. Yes, we were the better team on the day, and yes, we probably would have beaten Australia if it wasn't for Bryce. But to me, we didn't look like a champion side. I'm not convinced we would have won the World Cup even if we made it past the quarterfinals. The same fire the Springboks had in 2007, 2008 and 2009 seemed to be gone. Nonetheless, this video isn't about the failure of 2010 to 2011, it's about the success of 2007 to 2009, which in my opinion is the greatest era of South African rugby. It's an era which I'll always look back on with such pride and pleasant memories. It's an era etched into my heart, which had a profound impact on my love for rugby at a young age. It's simply a time I will never forget. Thanks for watching. See you next time.